So welcome to this short course on problem solving and AI. This course will be a little slow, a little clunky, because I really want to kind of work through an example with you. I don't want to just give you theory. I don't want to just give you abstracts. I want to kind of walk through specific prompts and a specific example. I'm going to take you down a few different paths so you can kind of get different ideas in your head about how you can use AI within your problem solving. And notice I don't say for your problem solving, but within it. Really for specific tasks in specific subsets or elements of your problem solving. So let me start with a little bit of theory, just to get, broaden your perspective, give you some ideas about how to think about this. And as we think about sort of two objectives in our problem solving, effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness, getting good outcomes; efficiency, getting those outcomes with as least effort as possible. And then sort of two ways AI comes into play. One is through automation, doing tasks for us, and the other is co-intelligence, which is a term I borrow from Ethan Mollick in his book, because I think it's really symbolizes the idea of another person in the room. Whether it's you plus one person, or it's five people plus a sixth. Either way, they're co-intelligence with you, right? So first of all, let's look at the automation side. I don't think, especially in this domain, we're really talking about automation for effectiveness in any sort of problem solving. It's really not doing the thing for you. It's not doing the task for you to get a better outcome than you could get. That's not really what we're trying to do here. So I believe that's just an absent block. Now, efficiency. Some of these aren't really problem solving, but we get scripts, we get standard work. But really the point I want to get to is troubleshooting, which is essentially solution matching, right? We're not really problem solving. It's a form of problem solving, but what we're trying to do in troubleshooting is match a known solution to a known problem, right? And some of us go through the first couple steps, and then, take especially tech help, we call somebody and then they follow a script. And so if the outcome is not that significant, not that dramatic, not that super important, and we just don't know the answer, we're just looking for a solution, troubleshooting is a very good approach, right? So my software doesn't work, what's next, right? What's the next step I take? We can certainly use AI to efficiently get through troubleshooting. More efficiently, or as bots in known solution spaces, matching solutions to problems as people interface with those agents. Now, more so in the co-intelligence, we actually have both effectiveness and efficiency. So effectiveness, which I think is probably more important, is really to broaden our thinking. So we might think about a problem in a certain way, and AI can be a tool, a co-intelligence, to help broaden our thinking. The same thing a coach would do, just to be clear. And I'm going to show you how that works. But also sort of find holes in logic, right? Sort of break down and poke at us a bit and challenge some of our thinking, give us things to consider in our logic chain as we're going through it. And then on the efficiency side, I think it's really just when we're stuck. Our wheels are spinning, we're staring at a blank sheet of paper or a blank screen or a blank whiteboard, or we're not even sitting down because the ideas are just spinning in our head, and just using AI as a co-intelligence can sort of just push us through the starting blocks, kind of get us off and get us moving. I can't tell you how many times I've engaged with AI where I never got the right answer that I was looking for from AI, but it sort of forced me through my own thinking in a way where I was stuck for weeks or maybe months and just not committing the time to it, and using AI helped me push through those steps and kind of get somewhere with my own thinking. Still my own thinking, it just sort of prompts me and gets me through those first few steps. Now, some of this depends on who is, if it's another team member, who is AI to you, right? And we'll show this in the examples of being acting as, right? We should almost always do this. Is who is AI trying to be in that particular moment? And I think in problem solving, there's sort of three common uses, two more than the third, but I'm going to focus on all three. The first is just being a problem solving coach. This is on methodology, approach, technique ideas on how to approach the problem. Not on the solution, but on ideas on how to approach it. And so we tell it to act as a problem-solving coach, and it's going to guide us through better problem solving. Now, you can make this much stronger if you start loading in information relevant to how you do problem solving or how you want to do problem solving. And I'll kind of show that as an example here in a second. Second, act as subject matter expert. Be domain specific, an expert in the problem I'm trying to solve. Help us see stuff maybe that we don't know just by digging into the world and looking for more information. And then the third is actually non-domain expert, something that's going to give you a new perspective, a different way of thinking about it. Right? This is where you have a conversation with somebody across a domain, and just a little bit of that hint from that other domain shines a different light on our problem. This happens all the time. I recommend the book Range as a way to understand more about this, but I'll show you an example of using that as well. So those are three different examples as we do this. Now, I'm going to use Claude. You can use any of the true sort of, not logic, but really sort of more analytical tools. I don't think Copilot really falls into this, but Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, these are probably the three most powerful when it comes to this type of work. My preference is Claude for anything where it's really co-intelligence. I use Perplexity for research. I use ChatGPT basically because they have some functionality that others don't. But as an actual model, I find for sort of co-intelligence, either the personality or the work it does fits me best. So that's what I use. Now, I recommend creating a project for either each problem, right? Nothing wrong with that, or just for problem solving in general. And Claude has memory capabilities, so it can learn more about your problem solving capabilities over time within a project. So I'm going to create a problem solving workspace as a project, and then we'll get to work on the work here. Now, you need a problem. I'm going to start with a problem, and I'm going to read some of this to you as I share. Just say, I'm not going to read all of it, but just so you understand what I'm working with as you go through this. Let me first kind of go up here to instructions. This is where you can really, within a project, start to give it some very specific information. So if your company has a course or a workbook on problem solving, you can upload it. You can upload presentations. I could upload a PDF of my entire book and just say, hey, follow the guidance in here. It's not a problem-solving technique. It's more about how to think about it, but you can upload stuff that helps shape that. So use that, especially if you're going to be coming back to the workspace or the project over and over again, to use this for your help. Now, I'm going to start with a problem, and I'm going to kind of give it a very general description of a problem, kind of like I was just talking to a coach. I was just explaining it, but I'm going to ask it not to do anything with it. I'm just going to describe the problem. And this particular problem actually is it's sort of an amalgamation of many different clients. It's not an uncommon problem. Many companies have this to some degree. And so because it's a more generic problem, we're not going to get into all the specifics that you might, right? If you were going to use this, you'd get into a lot more specifics. You'd have a lot more data that you start using, at least at some point in it. But really right now, all I'm doing is giving the problem. And this is, we want to work on product development innovations that are further off, right? Deeper innovations, likely to take 3 years to develop. We're a smaller company, not a lot of excess resources. Most of the resources tied to current year projects that have clear objectives and returns. And then those same resources are challenged to take on cost reduction and component replacement projects, sometimes on an emergency basis, also not uncommon, further distracting them from any long-term focus. We've been struggling with this for a few years and need to find a way to get through some dedicated effort on high-risk, high-reward product innovation. Again, many of you may read that and go, oh, that describes us. Like I said, not an uncommon problem for a lot of companies. So I'm not doing anything with it. All I'm doing is feeding in sort of a very generic and broad description of my problem. So every time you do this, you may have to wait a little bit. I have extended thinking enabled. My explanation or description of this is it basically sort of breaks down your request into multiple sub-prompts on its own. So it's essentially background code that helps engage with the AI. It doesn't actually replace the AI model with a logic model, but it inserts sort of a layer of it. It does, give you some guidance on what it's doing in its thought process. So thankfully, it's no longer a black box. That has sometimes been the case, but you kind of know what it did and how it did it. So it's, again, it's even saying it's a classic problem, but it's going to respond. It's really important to understand the excitement that AI will give you. It wants to jump ahead. It wants to jump to the end. It's really helpful to restrain it, to rein it in, to ask it only to do one step at a time as you're doing stuff. Otherwise, it will jump ahead a little bit. And so this is where, kind of doing one step at a time, very, very helpful to help pull in, rein in some of its exuberance, where it likes to get excited and jump ahead. Now, the first example I'm going to give you of engaging with this is asking it to form a problem statement, right? Because this is not necessarily easy. If anybody's followed me for any period of time, you know that I think problem statements, getting the problem statement right, framing the problem statement is fundamentally vital. So how do we do that, right? As a coach, I can spend a lot of time on this. So I'm going to provide all of these prompts in the show notes or in the context below. But here, you can copy and paste these as you go through this, and I'm simply going to replace a spot here to put in your problem statement for the problem above. So basically, I'm asking it to be a problem-solving coach. We're just talking about problem framing. I want some narrowly scoped. I want some broadly scoped. It kind of defines what those might be. And for each problem statement, give me the key assumptions and what it includes versus excludes, right? And that's sort of the key, right? No matter what, we are applying constraints to a problem when we're framing it. And if we don't do that well, right, we are assuming cause and effect, right? People say the guidance is don't assume cause and effect, don't assume cause at all, don't assume solution space, but a problem statement is like a vector. It determines the magnitude and direction in which you're trying to go. And so no matter how you frame it, you will be assuming some aspect of what's included and what's not in how you framed it. So that's why having some multiple options and working through them is so useful. So let's see what it comes back with. We're not going to read through all of these as we do this, but I'm going to kind of pick some examples just to think about this. Now, depending on how this works, sometimes it takes a little while, right? This is where I don't want to say jumping back and forth, but sitting and waiting for it is actually a great headspace for your mind to continue to engage with a problem, because that's what you're here doing. So here we got a narrow one, right? So how can we shield 20% of an engineering team's capacity from emergency interruptions for the next 12 months? So absolutely, it's picking a direction as it's headed down, right? It assumes that if we just eliminate that one constraint or imposing factor on our system, because the system is complicated, we've got to start somewhere, that we will make some progress. I might feel that's a little too narrow and leaves a little too much out, and you can see it excludes a whole bunch in the process. Long-term sustainable model beyond year one. Gee, that's pretty important. So another example, how can we reduce emergency component replacement cycles from disrupting planned work by establishing buffer inventory? So this works around the problem. Now we get more broadly scoped. This is more thinking about the system itself. How can we redesign our business model and resource planning to sustainably allocate 15 to 20% of company capacity to 3+ year innovation horizons while maintaining, etc. So this is more probably where I want to head, right? If I want to go back to these, I might ask for, hey, focus less on emergency interruptions. That's just one constraint. It kind of hyper-focused on that, perhaps in how I described it, because that's how we work, right? It's not unusual, right? We pick one element, it's there, it's concrete, we hyper-focus on it. That's sort of what it does. So I could ask for some other versions to be less focused. Down here, I'm getting more in the broader system. This is going to lead me down a more complex path, but also a more inclusive path as a result of that, right? So if you go look at what it includes, the entire resource planning system, the business model, multiple time horizons, it includes a lot of factors. Again, that makes it more specific, or more broad and more inclusive, but also more complex, right? So if we know very little about how we want to proceed, that's probably great. If we know more about really where we're headed or where we want to focus, that's probably too broad. And then here's one around organizational culture and decision-making frameworks. So this isn't less about the system and more about how we make decisions about the system. So if we think, yeah, it's the system's fine, it's us, right? It's how we use it. That's more likely to be the problem. This might be a better one, right? So these are just examples about how we can go. This recommended number 3. It's actually the one I was headed towards because it's so inclusive, and it gives me reasons why I might do it. And if I disagree with those reasons, great. That, like a co-intelligence, me interacting with it, gives me perspective on how to think about my problem. Now I'm going to take it down a different path and basically act as an expert in product product development and innovation. So here, we kind of have a generic prompt for specifying the domain. I'm going to eliminate the generic part and basically say product development and innovation. And so now I'm an expert, and I'm still looking for problem statements. But how would, if somebody came in, if I hired a consultant to come in and say, how do you describe the problem that I'm describing to you? This might be what you're going to get back. So that's going to be more likely to dig into frameworks that problem-solving innovation experts might use. So here you can see this right out of the gate. How do we establish a structured stage gate 0 and 1 process with dedicated discovery sprints? So it's sort of assuming a solution already, right? And that's, quite frankly, what's more likely to happen when you have a subject matter expert, right? They kind of already know where you're headed. They're going to jump to the end. That's what they're there for, as a subject matter expert. And so I'm just showing you these two techniques. I would generally prefer the first technique, but sometimes this helps inform it as well. How do we migrate our current product architecture to a platform model? So platform model changes certain things. There's some assumptions about how that works. And so how do we kind of head down that path? More broadly, build an ambidextrous organization on multiple time horizons, sort of working on a fundamental, as it says here, uses the 3 horizons framework, a framework around innovation. So it's going to pull from that. And how can we fundamentally redefine our product development operating model? So that's actually closer, I think, to a problem-solving coach, but it still leaves a lot of opportunities as we go forward. So I'm going to go back to the original one recommended, which was problem statement 3. I'm just going to copy and paste that for now. What I'm going to say, I'm going to jump down here to the prompt and say, from here forward, assume this is the problem statement I'm working with. There we go. Now, very generically speaking, right? And my key point here is you want to be able to jump in and out of different steps of problem solving. However narrowly or specifically you want to define that as you go forward. So So I'm going to sort of jump ahead a little bit because there's a whole lot more you could do there, but I'm going to get into root cause, right? How do we want to understand the current state? So I'm going to go back to being a problem-solving coach, and I'm going to ask it for guidance on what methods, what techniques are we going to use to help better understand current reality. I always like to say as a coach, my favorite questions here are what are we trying to learn or understand, and what's the best way to go find out. So this is going to recommend some approaches before we just start process mapping and doing 5 whys. So it's recommending a time and capacity flow audit. So that's one approach, fairly complicated. It says time, resources, required medium. Not entirely sure I'd agree with that. I think it might be more large, but certainly has some merits. Resource allocation, decision archaeology. Probably not super complicated or time-consuming, but hard and sort of invasive in terms of thinking through it, right? So forensically examine is what you're looking for in this approach. And it says low, medium. I think that's fair in time, but perhaps not intensity. Systems dynamics mapping, basically causal loop diagrams, right? Very common. Something for a complex system, it's probably going to be my go-to, even if I'm starting to map out causal loop diagrams in my head. So give some instructions, what it's doing. It's going to say medium. I'm going to say medium to medium hard. As it goes forward, I don't think, well, okay, that workshop 2 to 3 hours. So it's recommending an approach here. So it's recommending the sequence, 1, 2, 3. As far as it goes through it and why you do that. Again, we don't need to get into all the details. You can listen to this as it's a problem-solving coach and then say, yeah, that resonates with me. That makes sense to me. Versus, or perhaps I think there's some flawed assumptions. That sounds too hard. I don't think that's going to yield anything. And you can sort of challenge it as you go back rather than just pick what's next. Now, you can also try that same thing with a subject matter expert, right? Subject matter expert is going to perhaps give you some different ways in which they understand it because they already understand the root cause. They've seen this problem 100 times before, and so they can at least anticipate what they might be. So in this prompt, we're really looking actually saying, hey, tell us root causes. What could be some root causes? What could be some contributing factors? What could be some triggering events? And so basically we're taking a different approach. Instead of discovering the causes, we're kind of jumping to getting from a subject matter expert, what might they be? And then how do I test whether or not those are true? All right? So it's going to give me some examples. Root cause number 1, unified business model optimization for efficiency, not ambidextry. So that makes sense, certainly very possible. Root cause number 2, absence of separate governance architecture for exploration versus exploitation. Very common, right? What's the ROI on exploration? Unknown. Exploitation, very specific, right? So very common that we look at those next to each other and we always go after the sure things versus the shot in the dark. Technical architecture creates artificial resource scarcity. So how we go through that, we have specific levels of technical resources that essentially constrains who we want to engage, how do we test for that, etc. So it goes on and on, right? I don't need to go through this. We're not actually trying to solve the problem today, but contributing factors. Tactical work has stronger psychological and political gravity. What did you get done this week? What's your dopamine hit from? So the contributing factors, it goes through several of those, and then triggering events. Quarterly revenue shortfalls or budget pressure, as an example, triggers us into those things. So it kind of mapped them out a little bit and gave me some things to think about. Again, lots of information for me to consider. Now we're going to jump way ahead. Once we understand better cause and effect and why we've done all this work, right? So perhaps weeks have passed by. We want to start ideating. Now, to be clear, right, because I'm jumping to the end here, if I'm ideating, I need to know current reality, right? I haven't validated it or done any of this work, so I would probably have a whole bunch of information now to feed into this project. All the work that we've done, all the conclusions. But we want to develop some solutions. Now, the problem-solving expert might only recommend some methodologies for ideation. But you very likely know those. You probably can go about that. But I'm not going to use that technique, use that approach with AI to get some ideas. Or just put in your plan and say, here's how I plan to go next, and ask it for feedback is a simple way to take the next step. But I'm going to ask it to be an SME and give me some ideation. But I'm going to, I'm not going to ask it this because this is usually what will happen. It will revert to the mean, which means it will give me the most typical answers. So again, I'm asking it, in this case, for incremental, immediate answers, some more systematic, big ones, some sort of obvious but problematic, right? Things that everybody will suggest but might be difficult, and then some creative, unconventional, right? And even with a human being, right, I want to do this last one or this creative one last because we want to push through and be informed by those other categories before we get to that. And then, sort of get some understanding behind every solution. So product development, innovation, management perspective. So here we go. Innovation, protected time blocks. Seems pretty obvious, right? That would be something we'd do. Innovation advocate, executive role with explicit decision authority. Who's the sponsor? Who's the champion? Who gets to decide we want to work on this stuff? Innovation options, financial accounting. So how do we use the option modeling to put more value on longer term bets? So those are things I'm going to, I'll just pick one from each. Systematic, comprehensive, 3 horizons operating model, right? That's one sort of out of the books, so to speak. We'll go to category C. It's still thinking, so which is great. Let me give another one here. Dual track compensation system with innovation career path, right? So people are incentivized to work on some of that long time horizon stuff, and they have different time horizons. So let's go to the obvious but problematic. Create dedicated innovation teams separate from main organization. 100%, right? You hear about this all the time. It's very obvious, but it's hard. It requires money fundamentally because you're sort of taking resources away from or putting more money into those longer things. And so, yeah, it's obvious. It's hard, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. It's sometimes very useful. How do we do a pilot? Right? How do we test it out with a pilot? And then the creative innovation venture fund. We might sort of see what comes to the surface. Time banking system where we can sort of borrow time. Innovation sabbatical program. Absolutely, right? I've seen this work. Not in a lot of environments, but send people off, they get a sabbatical, go work on something, and come back ready to go. So lots of stuff. Now, it's still going. I'm going to kind of show you the last option. I'm going to give you 2 different versions of this. And this is that third branch, which is how would somebody else think about this problem, right? So I love doing this. They may not solve it for us, but I'm going to hit stop here to jump to the end. And how will other people solve this? So what I'm looking for is in this first one, how would other companies solve it? So I'm going to just hit go, and then I'll show you what the prompt is. So it's in 3 categories. Disney, Chick-fil-A, Apple, sort of customer experience companies, scale and efficiency innovators, Netflix, Amazon, Google, and innovation process leaders, 3M, IDEO, Procter & Gamble. So you can put in anybody you want, any companies you admire that have enough information about how they work, right? I'm not going to go through these, but specifically, I'll just pick one. But how would Amazon solve this? Or how, in some cases, how have they solved this? So, you start to look at how different companies would solve it. If you pick companies where there's a lot written about them, maybe even books, you're going to get more information, more specificity out of these examples. So this is going to go on for a while, right? As we go into, I'll just go back to the first one, Amazon long-term thinking architecture, right? Work backwards from customer needs, multi-year time horizon. They don't care how much money they'll lose as long as they're hitting customer needs, right? Fundamental belief system in how they operate. So this will go on for a while, which is great because I get more to work with. It's giving me 3M as well. But then I'm going to show you another version of this, and I'm going to think about different people. How would different people think about this? So you're going to pick, I'll say, famous people who have an opportunity. I need to hit stop here, and then start with my new prompt. So think about these famous people. So we have systematic experimenters, Thomas Edison, and the fictional one, MacGyver. Right? So nothing wrong with fictional. There's lots of content about these people, especially if they've been used as essentially a synonym for something, as MacGyver has been. Albert Einstein, so the theoretical first principle thinkers. Albert Einstein, Aristotle, two examples. Both a lot written about them and by them. Critical questioners, Socrates, Sherlock Holmes, again, fictional, but lots of stuff about how they think available. And lateral creative thinkers, Mark Twain, Leonardo da Vinci. Right? So this is fun. Again, will any of these solutions actually apply? Very likely not, but it can aspire, right? If I take some of these ideas, combine them with other things, if nothing else, maybe even get a good quote, it helps move forward my thinking about how to solve it. So MacGyver, the resource constraint master is what they call them. So he asks a bunch of questions about it. Unconventional method. Here's what we're going to go. Innovation capacity scavenger hunt. Week-long hunt for hidden capacity, right? Which is interesting, right? Actually pretty boring, but really interesting. Where's our hidden capacity? Let's do a scavenger hunt. I love that idea. Sounds like a very lean thinking idea, but we got it from MacGyver. So I'm going to jump on. I'm kind of curious if we've gotten down to, Sherlock Holmes. Unconventional method, the forensic audit. Follow the capacity trail, right? Kind of already gotten to this idea. Track one innovation hour through its life cycle. So it's going through some approach, but it's basically a crime scene investigation is what it's trying to do. And this is more likely, less a solution, more likely to go find a solution in this particular case. So this will keep going for a little bit. We don't need to see the whole thing. But the idea of this is, again, use it as a co-intelligence, either to get you unstuck, where you start reacting to other ideas, other stuff out there in your field, and trigger thoughts, or expand your thinking. Take your thoughts in places it wouldn't have gone otherwise. Our brains will very quickly jump to our first conclusion, but break free of that logic chain that we're in. Test it, broaden it, challenge it, extend the time horizon. Again, as a coach, that's often what I'm doing. But I want to highlight one key thing at the end here, and that is that problem solving is not a task. It is a combination of a whole bunch of different skills, mindsets, and steps. And so when you try to use something like AI to do problem solving for you, it's like trying to live for you, right? It's too complicated. There's more involved there. It will give you an answer. It will give you an enthusiastic answer. The answer may even be useful many times. But if you truly wanted to use it to help with your problem solving, understand that you're only doing one step at a time, you're only employing one or two skills at a time, and have your AI interact with you as a co-intelligence, either one-on-one, extending your team of 1 to 2, or extending your team of 5 to 6 to interact and act as that co-intelligence, right? Do not try to jump to the end thinking AI is simply smarter than you are, because that's not necessarily what we're about. We're here for discovery, for learning, and to go solve problems that we haven't solved yet. So again, all of these notes will be available. You can copy and paste the prompts and play with it yourself. I'd love to hear your experiments, your successes, your failures, what's worked, what hasn't. And remember, these tools are evolving, so evolve with it. Be curious. Try 2 different models. Modify your techniques. Do different things, because as these models improve or at least change, your techniques of engaging with them will have to change and improve as well. So good luck. Happy problem solving.